Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for stopping by today. Today's projects are a part of the Pretty Pink Posh October product release blog hop. So be sure you head on over to my blog. I will have information about that blog hop as well as some information on some giveaways. And that will all be over at my blog. You can check the description box at YouTube for a direct link over there. I wanted to show you some of the fun new products included in this release. This is the Halloween Friends stamp set. I love how these little animals are dressed up, and I think it is so appropriate that the raccoon is dressed up like a bank robber. I just love that. And there are coordinating dies with that. This is the Christmas Friends stamp set. I love these little boys and girls, and these fonts on these sentiments on both stamp sets are to die for. I just love them. Now, I also have this stitched pieces die. Now, I wanted to show you how this cuts out because it actually cuts out 3 of these stitched outline kind of windows on your card. Now, you can either use it as kind of like a base for shaker windows or something like that, or you can use the little cutouts for like sentiments and that sort of thing. I think it would even be fun to kind of make a shaker card out of a couple of those windows and then kind of inset one of these pieces into there to create your sentiment on your shaker card. So that's a really cool new die set. I didn't end up using it in my projects today, but be sure to keep an eye on my blog because I am sure I will be using this in the future. Now, in addition to the stamps and dies released, I also have this little snowman stamp set here. This is called the Happy Snowman stamp set, and I really love the simplicity of this image because I think when images are simple like this, it really lends itself to versatility, and these small stamp sets are really cost effective as well. Now, in addition to all those fun new stamps and dies, there are some fun new sequin mixes. And let me just tell you, these snowflakes in these sequin mixes are awesome. I love them. They're kind of like holographic, and you're going to see me use those today. So I'm going to start out, I have my mini Misty here, and I am just grabbing a bunch of the images from both of the stamp sets here, and I am going to position them onto this watercolor cardstock. This is the Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. I am stamping on the smoother side of the cardstock. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stamp a bunch of images for me to watercolor all at once. So I've mounted those onto the lid of the Misty by just closing those on top of the stamps. And now I'm inking them up with some VersaFine Onyx Black Pigment ink. Now I chose the VersaFine for 2 reasons. I love the deep black image that I get with the VersaFine, but because it's a pigment ink, once it dries, it is also permanent, so I can watercolor with it. Now, VersaFine is also great for embossing, so if you needed some help keeping your watercolor in the lines, you could also use this ink to stamp your images and then add some clear embossing powder over the top and then emboss those. Now, I did want to show you this. I stamped these several times and I finally got smart. Do you see how I pulled my sleeve down over my hand so I could rub my hand all over the lid of the Misty? Gave me an amazing impression. So now I may just always have to wear long sleeves when I craft. So once I got them all stamped, I hit them with my heat tool to dry them, and then I watercolored them using my Kuretake Gonzai Tombi watercolors. Now, if I am saying that wrong, you will just have to forgive me because I'm not Japanese. So I'm sorry about that. Spanish is my thing, Japanese is not. Now, I did want to show you, I took a few takes on these, which is why I stamped them more than once. My first bear there on the right turned out hideous, so I redid that one. I actually redid that 3 times. My little guy there, I wasn't happy with him, so I recolored him. But I just went to town and had a great time watercoloring these. I didn't film it. I'm not including it in this because there was nothing really special. The only thing I can tell you is that when you're watercoloring, start light and let your color build up, because if you come in heavy at first, you can't take the color away. But if you kind of start out with a light wash of color and then build that color up as it dries, you get much better results. Now I've gone ahead and taken a scallop circle die from Pretty Pink Posh and I've cut it out of some textured cardstock. And now I'm inking up this Warm Holiday Wishes sentiment from that Christmas Friends stamp set. And I have prepped a piece of vellum here with my anti-static powder tool from EK Success. I've stamped that sentiment onto my vellum using some Versamark ink. And now I've added this wow what's it called? Rich Pale Gold. This is the Detail Rich Pale Gold embossing powder. I'm obsessed with this color of gold embossing powder. It's seriously my new favorite. It has this softness to it that I guess that's why they call it pale gold. I don't know, but it is beautiful. So once I got that embossed and heat set, I went ahead and took this over to my trimmer and I let that Y kind of hang down into my trimming path. But what I did was I skipped over it with my blade. So you saw me pick up my blade and skip over that Y. And then I used my scissors to cut around the bottom of that Y. Now I'm just taking a little bit of Tombow Mono Multi-Glue. I'm adding a thin, very thin bead of it around the cutout of this window. And then I'm adding some acetate to that. That's going to be the window of my shaker card. And then I'm going to take my foam adhesive here and I'm just trimming it down to be really narrow. And then I'm going to tear off little pieces to put it around this frame that scallop circle die cuts. Now you can also use the inside part of this scallop circle die, which is really cool as well. But I'm just going to be using the frame today. So I've gone ahead and added my foam adhesive all over the back of that. And now I am insetting it onto this window where that acetate is. So it's just going to give it a little bit of dimension. You're going to see that this first shaker card I create is super simple. And that's because when I started trying to play with it, I realized that I loved the simplicity and the elegance of this card without adding any of those images to it. So in the later cards, what I'm going to do is go ahead and add some of those images. So I actually am making a few cards today. So what I've done here is I've taken a little bit more of that foam adhesive and I folded it over on itself so that I have a double layer of foam adhesive. And now I'm cutting that double layer of foam adhesive down. And I'm adding this all around the window of my shaker card. And I'm making sure that each of those foam pieces, as I work my way around that circle window, is touching each other so that my shaker guts can't fall out. I like to call them shaker guts. People call them shaker bits. I think they're the guts because they're the insides, right? I don't know why I started calling them shaker guts, but once upon a time I did, and now I just can't stop. So once I've added that all the way around the window and I've added also a double layer of foam adhesive all over the back of that card front, and now I am adding in these gorgeous snowflakes, and I'm going to add a lot of shaker guts into this card. I've also sprinkled in some of the 3mm sparkling clear sequins as well as some of the 6mm sparkling clear sequins just as kind of like a little filler, but I didn't want to add color to these because they already have this beautiful blue kind of tint to them. So I've just added some sparkling clear in there as like a space filler. Now for the backer of my shaker window, I did want this to have like a light blue cast. So I've just taken some pigment ink from Colorbox. I've added it onto a scrap piece of white cardstock using my mini round blending tool, my little Tim Holtz blending tool. And I've cut this down. You can see I didn't take a lot of care to make sure that it was cut precisely. I just need it to be bigger than my shaker window. And I've added a few little dots of multi-medium in the matte finish onto this backer piece so that I could add some sequins and snowflakes onto that backer piece. Now these will stay in place when everything else is kind of shaking around. So it's kind of a cool effect that you get a few that kind of just stay in place and don't move so that when your card is sitting upright, you still have the effect of that shaker. Now, once I got that all prepared, I went ahead and removed the backer from on the foam adhesive around the window there, and I applied my backer to that piece. And then I just kind of played with this a little bit. I thought I wanted to add some of these images, and originally it was my intent to do that, but I started looking at this and I just loved the simplicity of these snowflakes with that little bit of blue and this rich pale gold embossed sentiment. And I was like, I'm leaving it just like it is. So I just finished this card off by attaching the sentiment. I used a little bit of multimedia matte behind where the embossing powder is. And then I took that whole card front and I put it onto a teal layer. And then I layered that onto another linen card base. So it was cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. And that completes my first shaker card. Now, the other shaker cards were created much in the same way, so I'm not going to walk you through the entire thing. But on one of these shaker cards, I did do a little bit of embossing on the shaker window. So I have this Crafter's Companion heat-resistant acetate here. This is not what I use for every shaker window. It's a little thinner, quite honestly, than the window sheets that I normally use from Ellen Hudson. But this is great for embossing. I am not sure that the window sheets from Ellen Hudson are heat resistant, but I know that this one is. I guess I could have tried it out, but I didn't. So anyway, I cut this piece of acetate down to where it's larger than my shaker window so that it could be my backer piece for that front part of the shaker window. I prepped it with my EK Success powder tool, and I stamped my Season's Greetings sentiment onto the center there using my Mini Misty. And then I've gone ahead and applied the Rich Pale Gold embossing powder to this as well. Now, I did have some embossing powder hanging out around the edges, but overall, I got a pretty clean image. And I went ahead and just wiped away some of that extra embossing powder using a clean, dry paintbrush. And now I let my heat tool heat up all the way to its hottest point before I took it to my acetate. And you can see there, I'm just kind of adding the heat in little intervals so I get minimal warping on this acetate. And you can see how that's going to look behind my shaker window there. So for the other card, I went ahead and just stamped that warm holiday greetings sentiment onto the bottom of the card front. I also embossed this in the Rich Pale Gold embossing powder and then heat set that. Like I said, I'm totally obsessed with this gold embossing powder. It has to be my favorite. And I think I'm going to go buy a couple more jars and just put it in a separate little container because I think I'll be using this quite a bit.